Have you ever stayed in a hotel room and felt like you weren't alone, even when no one else was there tonight? We're diving into 3 chilling stories of hotel guests who never left. These tales will make you think twice before turning off the lights or answering a knock at the door. From shadowy figures in mirrors to mysterious cries in the night, these haunted hotel stories will leave you questioning what really happens when the world falls silent. Let's begin. Story 1. Room 217. Jake was a seasoned travel photographer who thrived on exploring remote destinations. On a rainy October evening, he checked into the historic Maplewood Hotel, nestled in the heart of a small New England town. The front desk clerk, a quiet older woman, handed him the key to room 217 and warned him with a faint smile, "Sleep well, sir." The room was quaint, adorned with vintage furniture and a faint smell of lavender. As Jake unpacked his gear, he noticed a leather-bound journal lying on the bedside table. Flipping it open, he found entries from various guests, each recounting strange experiences. One passage read, "If you hear whispers, do not answer." Laughing it off as a gimmick, Jake settled in for the night. At around 2 a.m., he was jolted awake by the sound of a faint knock on his door. Peering through the peephole, he saw no one. Dismissing it as his imagination, he returned to bed. Moments later, the knocking resumed, louder this time. Jake swung the door open but was met with an empty hallway. Uneasy, he locked the door and turned on every light in the room. Just as he began to relax, a soft whisper drifted from the bathroom. "Jake." His name, spoken so clearly, sent chills racing down his spine. Clutching his camera for comfort, he approached the bathroom. The mirror was fogged up as though someone had taken a hot shower. Written in the condensation were the words, "Get out." Jake froze, his heart pounding in his chest. As he turned away from the mirror, he felt a cold breath on the back of his neck. Spinning around, he found the bathroom empty. The lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness for a split second before returning. The whispering resumed, louder now, as though coming from all directions. It was a chorus of voices, each one repeating his name. Desperate to escape, Jake grabbed his phone to call the front desk, but the line was dead. His phone screen flickered, displaying a photo he had not taken, a blurry figure standing behind him. His blood ran cold as the figure began to move in the reflection of the mirror, stepping close with each flicker of the lights. He stumbled backward, tripping over his camera bag, and fell to the floor. The figure emerged fully from the mirror, its hollow eyes fixed on him. Its face was a distorted, grotesque version of a human, and its mouth moved as though it were trying to speak. Jake scrambled to his feet, grabbed his bag, and bolted for the door. The figure reached out, its hand passing through the air as though it were smoke. Jake didn't stop running until he was outside in the pouring rain. He jumped into his car, his hands shaking as he fumbled for the keys. When he finally started the engine, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the figure standing in the window of room 217, watching him leave. The next morning, he called the hotel to report his experience, only to learn that the room had been closed for renovations for years. His key had no record in the hotel's system. Shaken, Jake began researching the Maplewood Hotel's history. What he found was far more horrifying than he could have imagined. Decades earlier, a man named Robert Gage, a traveling salesman, had checked into room 217 and never checked out. Witnesses claimed they saw him pacing the hallway, muttering to himself late into the night. When the staff entered the room after days of silence, they found Robert's lifeless body in the bathtub. The water was ice cold, though the faucet had never been turned on. From that day forward, guests reported hearing whispers in the bathroom, and several claimed to see Robert's reflection in the mirror, staring back at them. Jake decided to dig deeper, reaching out to local historians. One woman, a retired librarian, told him about a chilling ritual tied to the hotel. "They say the builder of the Maplewood Hotel was deeply superstitious," she explained. "He believed mirrors could trap souls. That bathroom mirror in room 217, it's the original, untouched for over a century." Determined to validate his experience, Jake returned to the Maplewood Hotel with a small paranormal investigation team. They brought cameras, voice recorders, and motion detectors. As they entered room 217, the air grew heavy, and a sense of dread washed over them. Hours into their investigation, the whispers began. This time, they were captured clearly on the voice recorder, repeating Jake's name. The mirror fogged up again, and the words "Get out" appeared just as they had during Jake's first stay. Then, the unthinkable happened. The mirror cracked violently, and a shadowy figure stepped through. The team fled, leaving their equipment behind. Jake never spoke of the incident publicly, but the footage from the investigation was leaked online. Paranormal enthusiasts worldwide dissected every frame, and the legend of room 217 grew. To this day, the room remains sealed, but locals claim to see a shadowy figure staring out of its window, waiting for its next guest. Story 2. The Guest Who Never Left. Elena had just started her first job as a receptionist at the Ridgewood Inn, a hotel with a reputation for being charming yet eerie. The building was an old Victorian mansion that had been converted into a hotel decades ago. Its creaky floors and dimly lit hallways were the subject of local legends. Elena, however, dismissed the rumors as stories meant to scare tourists. One slow evening, an older man approached the desk. He wore a charcoal suit that looked like it had been pulled out of another era, and his movements were deliberate yet oddly stiff. "Room 302, if you please," he requested, his voice calm but almost mechanical. Elena obliged, handing him the key. As the man took it, his icy fingers brushed against hers, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. Hours later, during her routine walk through the lobby, she noticed the key to room 302 lying on the desk. Confused, she checked the room. It was spotless and empty. Thinking she might have made a mistake, she logged the incident and went about her shift. The following evening, the same man returned, requesting room 302 again. This time, Elena handed him the key but decided to keep an eye on the security cameras. She watched as he entered the elevator, but to her astonishment, he vanished before the doors even closed. Rushing to room 302, she found it empty once more. The bed was untouched, and the air felt unnaturally cold, as if someone, or something, had been there moments ago. Determined to get answers, Elena confronted her manager the next morning. His expression grew grim as she recounted her experience. "Room 302 hasn't been rented out for years," he admitted. "The last guest was that man, you just described him exactly. He passed away in his sleep decades ago." Shaken but curious, Elena decided to investigate further. She spent hours in the hotel's archives and local libraries, piecing together the story of the mysterious guest. His name was Richard Harlan, a prominent businessman in the 1950s who had frequented the Ridgewood Inn. According to old newspapers, Richard was found dead in room 302 under mysterious circumstances. The cause of death was listed as natural, but locals speculated that he had been hiding something, or someone, before his untimely demise. That night, Elena stayed late, determined to see Richard one more time. As the clock struck midnight, she heard the elevator chime. The sound echoed through the empty lobby, sending chills down her spine. The doors slid open, and there he stood, his lifeless eyes fixed directly on her. "I just need my room," he said softly, his voice carrying a weight that felt both sorrowful and demanding. Elena froze, unable to speak or move. The man stepped forward, his presence filling the room with an unnatural cold. As he approached, he reached out a hand, but just as he was about to touch her, he vanished into thin air. The chill lingered, wrapping around her like a second skin. When Elena returned home that night, she found a note slipped under her door. It was written in elegant handwriting, "Thank you for helping me return." Shaken but curious, she brought the note to work the next day, only to find that the key to room 302 had vanished from its place. The manager, growing increasingly concerned, claimed no such key had existed in years. The room had been sealed permanently after Richard's death. Elena couldn't shake the feeling that Richard had finally checked out for good. Yet, every so often, when walking past the elevator, she would hear it chime, even when no one was there. One night, she decided to take a closer look at the cameras. What she saw made her blood run cold. The elevator would open on its own, and for a brief moment, the faint outline of a man could be seen stepping out, always heading toward room 302. The experiences began to take a toll on her. The cold spots near the front desk grew more frequent, and the lights would flicker whenever she walked past the elevator. Guests started complaining of unexplained chills and faint whispers in the hallways. One guest even claimed to have seen a man in a charcoal suit pacing outside room 302 late at night. Elena eventually quit her job, unable to bear the constant presence of something she couldn't understand. But even after leaving, the Ridgewood Inn haunted her thoughts. She would often dream of Richard, his hollow eyes staring at her as he asked for his room one last time. In her dreams, the elevator doors would always close before she could answer. Years later, Elena returned to the Ridgewood Inn as a guest. The new management had renovated much of the building, but room 302 remained sealed. During her stay, she couldn't resist peeking at the hallway where the room was located. As she approached, she felt the familiar chill creeping over her. The air grew heavy, and for a brief moment, she thought she heard the elevator chime behind her. Turning around, She caught a glimpse of a man in a charcoal suit disappearing into the shadows. Elena left the hotel the next morning, vowing never to return. But the memories of Richard Harlan lingered, a reminder that some guests never truly check out. Story 3: The Crying Child. Tom and his wife, Laura, were on a weekend getaway at the Lakeview Hotel. Their room, 403, overlooked the misty lake, creating a serene backdrop. The hotel itself was an old, sprawling structure with creaky wooden floors and a history that the locals whispered about. But Tom and Laura, eager for a quiet escape, paid no mind to the ominous atmosphere. Their first night, however, was anything but peaceful. At midnight, Laura woke Tom with a gentle nudge. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. A faint sound of a child crying echoed through the room, sending chills down Tom's spine. They checked the hallway but found it empty. The crying grew louder, seemingly coming from the adjoining room. "It's probably another guest's child," Tom said, trying to dismiss the unease creeping over him. But when they called the front desk, the receptionist assured them that no children were staying on their floor. Puzzled but exhausted, they returned to bed. Hours later, Tom woke again to an icy chill that seemed to seep into his very bones. Laura was sitting up, staring at the corner of the room. "She's there," Laura whispered, her voice trembling. Tom followed her gaze but saw nothing. Just as he was about to speak, the crying stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie, high-pitched laughter. The sound was unnatural, echoing as though it came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Laura's eyes rolled back, and she began whispering in a voice that wasn't her own. "She's not done playing," Laura said, her lips moving mechanically. Panicked, Tom grabbed Laura and pulled her out of bed. Together, they ran into the hallway, banging on the nearest door for help. A housekeeper appeared, startled by their frantic shouts. She ushered them into a nearby storage closet and locked the door behind them. "You should never have stayed in 403, she said in a hushed tone. "A little girl drowned in the lake years ago. They never found her body. Guests in that room often leave with unwanted visitors." Desperate for answers, Tom spent the following day digging into the hotel's history. He discovered old newspaper clippings about a girl named Emily who had vanished one stormy night decades ago. The articles described how her cries were often heard by fishermen on the lake, though her body was never recovered. Guests staying in room 403 reported strange occurrences: disembodied laughter, freezing temperatures, and sightings of a small figure in mirrors or corners of the room. Despite Laura's protests, Tom decided to return to the room alone that evening. He needed closure. As he entered, the air grew heavy, and the temperature dropped sharply. The crying began again, louder and more anguished this time, as though the child were right next to him. In the mirror above the dresser, Tom saw the outline of a small figure. She was facing away from him, her shoulders shaking as though she was sobbing. "Emily," Tom whispered, his voice barely audible. Figure froze, and slowly, she turned to face him. Her hollow eyes stared into his, her mouth twisted into a scream that no sound accompanied. The mirror shattered, sending shards flying across the room. One piece grazed Tom's cheek, drawing blood. Tom stumbled backward, clutching his face. The crying turned into laughter, louder and more menacing. The room seemed to close in around him, the walls vibrating with the sound. Desperate to escape, he bolted for the door, but it slammed shut before he could reach it. The lights flickered, and he felt an icy grip on his wrist. Looking down, he saw a small, pale hand holding him tightly. He yanked free and threw himself against the door until it finally gave way. Running down the hallway, he could still hear the laughter chasing him, growing fainter as he reached the lobby. When he stepped outside into the night air, the sound ceased, leaving an eerie silence. But when Tom reached the car, Laura was gone. Panic set in as he searched the parking lot and nearby paths. Finally, he found her standing at the edge of the lake, her feet submerged in the icy water. She was staring into the distance, her face expressionless. "She wants me to stay," Laura said, her voice distant and hollow. Tom pulled her back, wrapping his arms around her trembling frame. But as he did, he felt something cold and wet brush against his neck. Turning sharply, he saw nothing but the dark, rippling water. The sensation lingered, as though unseen eyes were watching them. They left the hotel that night, driving in silence. Laura was never the same after that. She often woke Tom in the middle of the night, whispering, "She's here again." Her eyes were dark to the corners of their bedroom, and she would refuse to sleep without a light on. The couple eventually divorced, with Laura claiming she could still hear Emily's cries no matter where she went. Tom tried to move on, but the memories of that night haunted him. Years later, he came across a forum where others shared their experiences in room 403. Each story was eerily similar, with some claiming they had seen a small figure watching them from the lake's edge. Determined to find closure, Tom returned to the Lakeview Hotel one last time. As he stood by the lake, he thought he heard the faint sound of crying carried by the wind. He turned to leave, but not before catching a glimpse of a small figure reflected in the water, her hollow eyes fixed on him. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the shadows of reality. If these stories sent shivers down your spine, subscribe to Phantom Realities and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more spine-chilling tales. Share your thoughts and your own ghostly experiences in the comments below. We might feature them in an upcoming video. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and remember, sometimes the scariest things are the ones we can't explain. Sweet dreams.